Welcome to the Healthy Seas podcast, a show about what we need to do to have just that, healthy seas and a healthy future. I'm your host, Crystal DiMichelli, and in each episode, we talk about the problems facing the seas and oceans and the solutions we have to fix them. Come on in, the water's fine. Using her experience and passion for litigation, along with her deep love for the ocean, today's guest, Anna von Rebay, is the founder of Ocean Vision Legal, the first law firm in the world that specializes entirely in marine protection. Hi, Anna. Thank you for joining me on the Healthy Seas podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and hi to your side. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So, how did you get into litigation for marine protection? Ocean litigation is something new that I am not very familiar with, and I'm not sure other people are as well.
Yeah, that might be the case because it's really a term that I'm starting to create or that I'm aiming to create and to make come into existence. My journey with that actually goes back quite a while because when I was a teenager, I wanted to become a human rights activist. But at the same time, I also wanted to study. So when I finished with high school, I decided to study law because then I could combine that and become a human rights lawyer. And studying law school, I guess not only in Germany where I studied law, but probably in most of the countries, law studies are quite lengthy and competitive. So by the end of my law studies, I found myself in this tunnel in which it was only important who's going to get the best grades and who's going to get the best job and the most prestigious international law firm. And I was no exception to that. So after my studies, I started working in this big international law firm, had this amazing job. I was in litigation because that really is my passion. I love going to court. I love debating. I love negotiating. It's really something that it is something that comes from within myself. I love standing up for someone or something that maybe cannot go into the courtroom or that's not being heard. That's when my complete passion starts immediately. My dad always used to say, don't start debating with Anna. If you start, you've already lost. Yeah. And already in school, I was in a debating club and stuff like that. So yeah, so this is something that does reflect my passions. But after the shortest time in this litigation law firm, I found myself thinking what am I doing? I'm putting in my life force, my energy into cases that one person just wants more money from the other one. That's so far away from what I've actually wanted to do. And so very soon it was already obvious for me that I wanted to move away from that. And I had already achieved so many degrees. I was licensed to the bar. I had my mediator, all sorts of extra degrees. So the next step for me to do was actually to pursue a doctorate thesis maybe and to specialize like this. So I started looking out for a suitable topic in which I could specialize. And at that time, I had already started living in Indonesia. And there was really this one very significant day a couple of years back now that changed so much in my life. I still remember this day so much. I was sitting at the beach from where now is my home, and I was looking at the ocean and it's beautiful blue and the sky was blue and it was a misty day. So kind of the whole atmosphere was blue. And I was looking out into that and I was thinking, if we destroy the ocean, people aren't well either. So human rights.
That's true.
Yeah. And human rights and ocean rights are so interrelated. And that was the day that I decided that I wanted to go into ocean protection. And I get goosebumps still when I'm talking about it today because it was really so significant for me. And so that was...
And had you heard of this?
No, I hadn't heard of this before.
Okay, so you were just like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to pave my own way.
Very much. That's very much what I do. I do pave my own ways. I think that's how I got where I am, that there is no thinking in my mind that says, no, you can't do that. It just simply doesn't exist. I've never thought that. That's not an option. So I just thought yes, marine protection. And literally, honestly, you can just so call upon all young people to just empower yourself. what I did is I went and I hadn't lived in Indonesia back then. I was just visiting. So I went back to Germany. I literally Googled every professor in public international law in Germany who could be possibly interested in that topic. And I just wrote to all of them. And so I just made this opportunity happen. And the one professor with whom it resonated most and whom I am so grateful for, my doctoral supervisor, Professor Dr. Markus Schladebach from the University of Potsdam, he took so much time with me to really find out what I wanted to write my PhD topic about. And we were sure it should be ocean protection. And lots of people were talking about marine protected areas. And one thing that stuck out to me, though, was that that was about 2018, 2019. And the states started pledging that they wanted to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. But they had just failed their goal to protect 10% of the ocean by 2020. So I was thinking, like, okay, I am going to write about the legal framework of marine protected areas, but I'm not just going to write about like, how does it work? How do you designate them in international law? I'm going to write about how can we hold states accountable so that they have to designate these marine protected areas. And this is where my passion of litigation and marine protection comes together, of course, that I already had this litigation experience. So everything that I looked at was always from this lens of, okay, how can I hold someone accountable? And this is how this all started. And when I finished my PhD thesis, which was about like how can we hold states liable to designate and establish marine protected areas, I was at this kind of crossroads again. Did I want to start with an organization? Did I want to go into litigation? But I did want to go back into courtroom. I do want to do something. And I did want to not just, sit there. I wanted to combine my passion for litigation and the ocean, and this is how ocean litigation then started.
Your company has two branches that it focuses on: ocean litigation and ocean rights. Can you explain each of those?
Very much. I'm very passionate about both. So when I first started with Ocean Vision Legal, my law firm, our first branch was ocean litigation. So this is really to hold states accountable for their marine protection obligations. Because in my humble view or opinion, I think that we do have very strong marine protection laws, but we must start to judicially enforce them. Because we can start as many new laws as we want. If we don't start using them, they will remain without an effect. So ocean litigation really focuses on judicially enforcing the existing marine protection obligations. We do that especially in the international level. But because I am from Germany, of course, I also started working together with a German NGO. So I also worked in Germany, and the waters in Germany, the sea in the EU is governed by EU law. So we do a lot of EU law as well. At the same time, just with ocean litigation, also why I think it is so important, when you think of climate litigation, and this obviously is where this term ocean litigation also is derived from, this is something that has only started a couple of years ago. And everyone now knows of this term because it started to go around the globe like this fresh wind, motivating people, motivating young people to sue their governments. Then the Swiss senior ladies are suing the governments. Like of all generations, people suddenly feel like they have a seat at the table that was usually only occupied by politicians. And then I was wondering, why do we not have that for the ocean yet? That is exactly what we need. And this is what ocean litigation is intended to do. I'm trying to create this wave of ocean litigation going around the world, motivating young people, old people, everyone, that they actually can do something about the situation and we can change it, but we must stand up and we must judicially enforce the existing laws. So
they could be the voice for the ocean.
Thank you. In fact, I was just voted as the ambassador for the German committee of the UN Ocean Decade. So already speaking up. And then with ocean rights, at the same time, although we do have good marine protection laws, they are not flawless. And laws are something that are created by the society. They are not something nature given. It's not like a tree. It doesn't grow. Laws do not exist just because they exist. Laws exist because humans make them, and therefore they reflect the needs of the society. And the laws that we have, for example, UNCLOS, United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea, goes back to 1982. Obviously, I think this is a masterpiece of law, and it is shaped in a way that we can still apply it and interpret its obligations. But there are also treaties which I would wish could be adjusted. For example, a lot of the traditional treaties use nature as a resource. For example, the United Nations Fish Stock Agreement, as the title says, it is aimed to manage and regulate fishing, but it uses fish stock, so fish as a resource. And in my point of view, there must be this shift in ethics and in the society away from regulating human activities to conserve nature as a resource, to a recognition and to an awareness that nature itself has its own intrinsic values and must be protected just for the sake of being. And this is what we call rights of nature. And I was very lucky in my career to meet my very special legal counsel, Michelle Bender, who is very active and has been very active in rights of nature and ocean rights for many years. And I'm learning a lot from her. And with her joining the firm, we established a second branch, Ocean Rights, in which we advocate and work towards the recognition of ocean rights in many different aspects. So we do that at a universal level, in which we work on a universal declaration of ocean rights. And we do also specific cases, for example, working at the moment together with the Maori in New Zealand to recognize whale rights. And yeah, so that's
Oh,
ocean rights.
very cool. And I love that it's not just ocean in general, but you guys are honing in specifically on species as well.
Yes, there are so many interconnections. And yeah, so the whole marine ecosystem, the ocean, the water, the seafloor, the deep seabed, marine species. Yeah.
Yeah. You have an endless supply of plaintiffs or defendants.
Both, because
Both.
both with ocean litigation, we're going in and suing. And then with ocean rights, we are creating a legal standing for the ocean, for the species, so that we can actually then go into the courtroom and represent them and give them their own voice and stand up for them. And at the same time, of course, we also defend them from all harmful activities from people and from states. So yeah, both.
Very cool. We're hearing more and more about the use of law in the climate and the environmental fight. Are we right in thinking that they were popular in the 70s, but then they went silent for a bit?
I can't give a comprehensive overview of how it was in the 70s. I myself was born in the late 80s. So it's, of course, I know the history of law. And what I can say is that over the last 30, 40 years, it was definitely silent. And when thinking of climate litigation, for example, this is really a term that only came into existence a few years ago. Like this whole term didn't exist before that. And neither didn't or does ocean litigation. This is something that we're just starting. So yeah, it was very silent. And also there were a few cases that weren't successful. For example, there have also been rights of nature cases that weren't successful because the existing legal framework just didn't provide for it. So it is very important also with the same way that we are developing as a society to also have the laws developed to reflect that and to give a better protection and framework. And also for a long time, a lot of these issues were just not known. And this is especially true when it comes to the ocean, because up until the 1950s or so, it was honestly believed that the vastness and the bounty of the ocean is not exhaustible. Like we can throw in barrels with nuclear waste. We can take out tens of tons of things out of the ocean, it wouldn't exhaust. We can throw in tens of tons of trash into the ocean, it wouldn't matter. And so the awareness and the recognition of how much harm we do to it Sorry, but it's not even yet, not even now is there this recognition strong enough so that people would stop doing it or that states would start acting. So it's just something that wasn't on the radar. And now that it is, now we cannot hide behind unknowingness anymore. We have the knowledge. We do know that. And if we do not stand up now, then it is not because we don't know.
Right. We are consciously making that
Yes,
decision,
exactly.
which is only going to harm us and our children.
Yeah. And they are so allowed to point the fingers because, yes, it is a conscious
Mhm.
decision now.
As you were saying before, litigation is now more and more in the news with the idea of recognizing rights to nature and natural elements and ecocide. How is it a key tool for the environmental movement? Like, how has it changed the discourse? You were
It,
touching upon this before.
immensely, immensely. It has really reshaped the reality of what people think they can do. We see young people actually getting active. We see older people getting active. We already said that. And there are so many different branches. And for example, what you said, ecocide, the Stop Ecocide movement, with whom we're working together with very closely, aims to get that recognized as a crime. So to want an act of destroying the environment as a crime. We said that before, law is something that reflects the needs of society. And criminal law has several functions. Yes, it punishes, but it also prevents objects or subjects of rights from being harmed. So, with recognizing ecocide, for example, this is just such an amazing tool to prevent harms of the environment even more. So, I think that all of these different tools and coming together is under the umbrella of environmental law or ocean law really is that what was missing over the last decades in making marine protection effective, because we do have the science. What we now need is to enforce it and to implement it. And I'm sorry, but if states are not listening, if actors are not listening, companies are not listening, then we have to make them listen and just take them to court. And this is what the courts are for. In private law, no one would hesitate to sue if I was to, I don't know, kick your car and put a dent in it. Nobody would hesitate from suing me for that, for damages. Why do we do that in environmental law? So this is just something that really acknowledges that nature has value and that it's not just a resource for us.
It has intrinsic value.
Intrinsic value. That's it.
Speaking of the use of law in the climate fight that you mentioned, a few cases have been won by youth suing that their future was being robbed from them. Are you involved in any cases like this with young people? And what do you think of these cases?
I think they're amazing. I love seeing the young generation standing up and feeling empowered and not being held back by a generation of naysayers and just go out there and create their own reality. I think that's amazing. And no, I have not been involved in any of these past cases. Obviously, I do follow them very closely. And we are working in one case, as I mentioned before, the ocean is also very closely interrelated with human rights, and especially the human right to a healthy environment. And the human right to a healthy environment has a few special expressions or sub branches, one of them being, for example, rights of nature, one of them being future generational rights. So under this human right to a healthy environment, we are going to bring and feed in arguments and the future generational rights, which is in an ongoing case that I can't give much detail about. But yes, we are very much respecting that also in our cases.
Excellent. And where are the key places where these ocean cases are mostly decided? Where should people keep an eye on? Is it the EU level, national level, international? Where?
All of them. And my law firm has cases in the pipeline on all of these levels. National,
Oh,
EU,
okay.
and international. So I think all of these levels are relevant. There are 3 advisory opinions pending at international courts at the moment with regards to climate change. But one of them is especially, and that's interesting to also see the interconnectedness, one of them is to the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, asking the tribunal what the responsibilities of states are under the obligation to protect and preserve the marine environment with regards to climate change. So we do see how actually it's interrelated. We are waiting for the advisory opinion, so it's due anytime now. It's going to be published, and then there's going to be another one from the International Court of Justice and one from the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. So on the international level, there's a lot in the pipeline with regards to climate change. And the first one also with this intersection with the ocean. And then on national levels, there's a lot going on. I'm involved in, not directly, but for example, in Japan, there's a lot going on against the government because of the government's plan to, or already started to release nuclear wastewater from Fukushima into the ocean. In Iceland, there's a lot of opposition against the whaling licenses. I'm working on something. And so so there's really on all sorts of levels, there's so many avenues to do something.
What is the most exciting thing coming up or happening now in the world of ocean litigation or ocean rights?
Definitely these three
I can
advice.
only imagine there's so many.
Yes, there's a lot. And also not. So with regards to because I always focus on tangible things, like what is really something that has an effect. And with regards to that, I want to stress again these three advisory opinions that are pending. I think this is really the kind of opening scene for a whole ocean litigation decade, I hope. That's what I'm working for. So I think we can really stay tuned for these advisory opinions. They will really paint the picture of the future of ocean protection. Of course, one event this year taking place, which will potentially dramatically influence the well-being of the ocean, is the next meeting of the Assembly and the Council of the International Seabed Authority, where they decide on whether they want to release regulations for deep sea mining, which could have the most significant effect on the ocean that we have so far experienced. This is coming up in July. And there are lots of amazing ocean conferences ongoing where topics are debated and, where policy and advocacy is really happening. And I think it's really interesting to observe the ocean rights developments. For example, cases like the whale rights in New Zealand, I think can be very promising to really reshape the understanding of how we interact with the ocean. It's a campaign by an amazing organization called Blue Green Future, and they are trying to show that whales have a value, and when you hurt them, you open yourself for damages. And I think initiatives like this and movements like this can really start to reshape reality and the understanding of that nature has intrinsic values, and we can't just go out there and destroy it.
Can you give us an example of a case that you managed or a famous one from the past that was key to making a change in a dire situation? So I guess the one from the past doesn't necessarily have to be one of yours, but something that you look to as inspiration.
Yeah. So with regards to my cases, I'm working on a couple of cases, which I'm pretty sure will make a very big difference. But because they're all ongoing cases, I can't go into detail at this point of time. Ask me again in 6 months.
Understood.
And might know more.
We should do this again in 6 months.
100%. That would be great. So
Mhm.
at the moment, I can't
Yeah.
give details about the cases that I'm working on. And there have been, of course, landmark litigation cases, especially with climate change and opening up the possibility for individuals to hold their government accountable. And I think this mechanism in itself, whether it be because of sea level rise from the Torres Strait Islanders against Australia, whether it be future generations against the Minister for Environment, whatever this case, but what they all have in common is that it opened the reality that a single person or that a state can actually sue another state, or that individuals can sue the government and do something. And I think this is kind of the turning point and in key element that they all have in common.
By focusing on the ocean, you're also touching so many diverse topics, including climate change and human rights, waste, fishing. How do you navigate and manage this complexity of topics, but also their interconnectedness?
That is such a great point, and a point that I love. because I think it is key for us to understand that we are all part of one ecosystem. And if we deplete the ecosystem, we also deplete ourselves. And if we destroy the ocean, we also destroy ourselves. So, this understanding that this is all interconnected is so important. Of course, the issues out there are so many and so dire and so bad, it can get overwhelming. Like when you think about at the moment, I'm working a lot on bottom trawling and I work against deep sea mining. And then somebody addresses me, Anna, what about the plastic? And look at the ocean acidification, look at the eutrophication, look at this and that. And oh my God, I need, my law firm needs to be, but I need so much more workforce. So we need to tackle everything at once. But that we can't shoot for all stars at the same time. So I think there is value in focusing on key elements. And from this point of view, what we are doing in Ocean Vision Legal is that we have a litigation strategy. So we have a whole roadmap actually for the next 10 years of what we are going to do and how we're going to achieve it and what are the stepping stones to get there. So what we are starting with now is our key and stepping stone cases that have high success factor, that tackle the most harmful activities in the sea out there, and to strengthen through the jurisprudence of the international courts, the whole ocean protection framework. And with that, we can then go forward and bring more cases, because I'm very familiar with the judges at the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea. And last November, they invited me to their 8th Law of the Sea conference in South Korea to be a discussant as an expert on marine protected areas. And when I talked with the judges, what became obvious is that they are also keen in accepting their role to develop the law, because that is the role of the court and of the judges. Like when we think of other cases for the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea, we have the United Nations Convention for the Law of the Sea, which is amazing. It's called the Constitution for the Ocean. And it really is. It provides so much basis and foundation for work. But it is a constitution that was adopted in 1982. And it's amazing that its regulations are still valid. Why? Because they are phrased and formulated in such an abstract way that they can still be interpreted. And the interpretation happens by the judges. So now it's upon the judges to interpret the obligations and regulations that we have in a way that reflect the needs and the knowledge of the society that we have now. And through that, they can establish more specific regulations through the jurisprudence. And this is why I think this is only the opening year of ocean litigation, and that there's a whole decade to come and hopefully whole wave to come to solidify the marine protection framework.
Yes, hopefully, for sure. Who are your typical clients? When do they come to you? What kind of projects?
I exclusively work together with environmental NGOs. And this can happen on different levels. Like when I first started out, it was more me creating a project and then reaching out and trying to find people who would support that. And now it's also sometimes the other way around, that actually some of the clients that I had, or we did get known in a broader network, and that NGOs approach us and ask us specifically if we could help them with a legal assessment, if we can take a case, or ask for consultation. And yeah, it is amazing. Ocean Vision Legal is the first and still only law firm out there that entirely specializes on marine protection. So I think with that, we're just still very much in a niche. And it is funny how one's reality becomes so defined by what we focus on. Like I work on ocean issues. In my reality, that's so huge. Like everything is about the ocean. But, when you step out of your bubble again, a little bit, and realize that there are so many things going on in the world, and the ocean is one part of it. Nonetheless, the ocean, covers 70%, more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and is the biggest ecosystem on the whole planet. So I think it is a very good niche to focus on. And so I'm enjoying seeing this growing.
When did you start Ocean Vision
We're
Legal?
still a very young firm. We are now in our second year. So just 2 years ago.
Okay.
And yeah, so basically, we understand
And
ourselves
it's
very
just
much as
been
a young startup. By coincidence, I'm not trying to discriminate, but for some reason, we are an entirely female-led and organized and operated law firm. So we're only girls. We're the ocean mission warrioresses, and very much understand ourselves as being a startup. And everyone on the team is really so deeply invested in the ocean and is beyond, working at Ocean Vision Legal as a job, really invested in helping Ocean Vision Legal grow and having this shared mission and vision that all, lets us thrive to protect the ocean and to use the law to do that.
and you said that NGOs are bringing these cases to you, but has there been any class action from the general public?
Class actions in a traditional sense more exist in American countries or in the American sphere, from my knowledge. In Germany, this is just something that was only allowed a couple of years ago because of the diesel scandal, when there was just such a broad society that all have the same cases. Before that, it didn't even exist. And so I'm not involved in any class actions. However, when we do look at Japan and Fukushima, there's certainly some initiatives that try to mobilize as many individuals as possible, whether it then also being for demonstrations and to create more sway and to harness the power of the many to get things going. But I'm not working on
Mm,
any class actions.
okay. Or I guess any litigation from the general public?
Well, with that, what I understand is you could say that, for example, litigation from NGOs would represent the general public. Because what we
Mm.
have in environmental law, there used to be one legal technical problem, procedural problem, is that in law, we usually have this necessity. If you want to bring a case to a court, you must have legal standing. Legal standing usually is you have when your own rights are violated. Like, for example, if somebody destroys someone else's car, the owner of the car can bring the lawsuit, but not a completely unrelated person because it's not their own rights. So it's very clear why we need to have a legal standing and why it needs to have own rights. And this is the shortcoming also that ocean rights aims to fill, is that at the moment, trees, whales, birds, nature does not have legal standing in court. And this is what we're filling with ocean rights. But what I wanted to get at now is that there is a second mechanism that was introduced to fill that through the Aarhus Convention that recognized this problem that in environmental issues, usually there is no legal standing because if someone destroys a forest, it is very difficult for me as an individual person to lay down that my own individual rights are now heard and I can bring the case. So through the Aarhus Convention, that's an international convention and is accepted in Europe and also in national jurisdictions, environmental NGOs have a legal standing for those cases. So it is in many cases the NGOs that then can actually stand up and bring a lawsuit for those cases. So this is why I can represent an NGO, for example, for illegal fishing techniques that are happening in the sea, where an individual person would have a hard time arguing that their individual right is now harmed by this harmful fishing technique. Whereas an NGO, just because of being an NGO, is provided this legal standing because otherwise nobody else could do it. So in this sense, this is a little bit of a public
Oh,
interest. And
makes
also
sense.
with that, I
Okay.
need to clarify that I only work in cases like that. Like I only work in public interest lawsuits that are brought by NGOs or states. I don't do
Okay.
anything else.
And what are three things in the near future people should pay attention to in this legal area if they care about the ocean?
One, we've talked about it, are the advisory opinions. I am really excited for the outcome of these advisory opinions. Two, we also mentioned it, the council and the assembly meetings of the International Seabed Authority this July will be dramatic, or yeah, we will see what comes out with that, but it can potentially be negative. And yeah, and then I also said that before, like I would keep my eyes open for all these ocean conferences and that take place all around the world because there's so much discussion happening in which we can actually get involved. And it is quite interesting to see all these developments of these new treaties. Like we just adopted the High Seas Treaty, BBNJ, and the plastic treaty is being negotiated. And so all these new and upcoming laws, and how can you yourself be involved in that? And in many different countries, there are sub movements of rights of nature or ecocide. So you can get engaged in to organizations, you can volunteer with organizations. And there's so much one could do and one could keep a look at. So yeah, there's a lot going on.
What gives you the most hope for this tool of law in the coming marine protection fights?
Effectiveness. I am all for effectiveness because I so honor all the scientific findings that we have. And truly, I think that the law itself would be empty if we didn't have the science, because the law itself can only be a framework. But the picture itself is painted by the science and by the scientific findings. And I find it amazing the efforts that we have and the efforts of the scientists out there. But what is really missing is the effectiveness, because we have those findings and nothing is changing. So, and in this regard, I understand the law to be the effective tool that we can use to make these scientific findings effective and to translate them into a sharp argument in court. So what I'm really looking at and what my emphasis in my whole work is about is making marine protection effective. That's at the core of my ambition with this whole project and with all the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I wish you luck. I hope you're so effective.
Thank you.
And last but not least, what should a young law student do if they want to pursue a career like this?
Believe in themselves, not say no, and give me a call. Because I'm involved in quite a few mentorship programs, because I don't believe that life or studies or anything like that is linear. We all encounter, and especially, when we're younger and we're trying to find ourselves and our own truth, and we're having now the opportunity of doing so much, but then, how are we to find out what of it is that we really want to do? And there are ups and there are downs. And I walked through them and I found my way. And I'm so happy to share of what I've learned and what motivated me and what kept me going and what did I have to figure out and how did I do it. And I'm more than happy to share that with anyone who's struggling or with anyone who is on the lookout for their own truth, because I think that's something very beautiful and something very difficult and something that you have to find yourself, but you can always ask for help and support.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been really interesting, and I'm so excited for what you're going to be able to accomplish, because we need it so desperately. And it's wonderful that there are people like you doing these things and inspiring others to do so as well. Thank you for that, Anna.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to sharing about my passion, to sharing about our work. What I always hope is to inspire more people to really do what they stand for and to go out there and make the world a better place and protect the ocean. So thank you so much for having the time to chat with me today.
Thank you. Good luck in all you do. Healthy Seas is a nonprofit on a journey from waste to wear. Founded in 2013, the organization aims at reducing marine litter caused by lost fishing gear through cleanup, prevention, and education activities. The nets collected by Healthy Seas are subsequently reused and recycled and used by its partners for the creation of new products.